Hi, I'm Jamie Miller, a registered SQF consultant and food safety consultant at Kellerman Consulting, and you are watching our video series on environmental monitoring programs. In this series, we establish the foundational aspects of an environmental monitoring program, as well as the more complex concepts in organizing and maintaining a program. Now we can turn our attention to what to do when swabbing uncovers the presence of pathogens or spoilage organisms in the facility. As we stated in our first episode of this series, we do expect to find positive results. And here, positive means we have identified the presence of a pathogen or potential presence of a pathogen when we swab aggressively for these organisms. Included in our discussion of a response to these positive results are remediation steps, including increased cleaning and sanitation, as well as follow-up swabbing. Additionally, we are going to cover trending results, which can help us demonstrate control even when we have results that require immediate action. So let's start by looking at what steps shall be taken in the facility when a pathogen is discovered during environmental monitoring. Once environmental swabbing occurs in the facility, it usually takes between 1 and 3 days for pathogen testing to conclude and 5 days for yeast and mold testing. Please check with the lab you are using for exact times. Within that time frame, testing which identifies the presence of a pathogen will be communicated to the facility as a presumptive positive at first, and the facility can determine whether or not to confirm through a follow-up monitoring by the lab. In most situations, environmental monitoring tests for the genus organism, which means a group of organisms that include the pathogen being investigated. As an example, when listeria testing is performed, it is testing for any of the species of listeria, not only Listeria monocytogenes, which is the pathogen of concern. Once a presumptive for Listeria genus is confirmed, the lab will communicate the result and ask if the facility would like to do an identification of the species, and at that point, the lab will test to determine if it is a dangerous pathogen or just a close cousin. At the point of discovery of the presumptive positive, so that is the first notification, the safety lead should prepare all of the necessary steps to effectively investigate the scope of the problem and how to remove the pathogen from the environment. The facility needs to have a plan in place, ideally in an SOP format, to define what to do when addressing a presumptive positive. Many facilities choose to treat presumptive positives as an actual positive and follow the corrective actions in place for the pathogen detecting without conclusive testing. When a positive result is reported by the lab, the facility needs to address the positive by following their written plan of carefully reviewing the swab location and performing an investigation for that area. This positive indicates one location where the organism is found. Now that we have found bacteria in one location, we want to extinguish the organism and eliminate the sources of entry, migration, and harborage. But first, we must investigate further. The facility shall initiate the investigation by swabbing one or more surfaces in the general vicinity of that presumptive positive. If several swabs come back showing an indication of pathogens, remediation must occur. The next step is to make sure that the area or areas where the pathogen is discovered are blocked off from operations as much as possible to avoid employees or equipment spreading the pathogen to other areas. The safety team should be brought together, and a plan for follow-up swabbing, cleaning, and documentation must be defined along with a timeline for each action. The important thing to remember is that the facility needs to maintain integrity in its record keeping and needs to make the safest choices available. So let's look at the actual actions that go with removing the pathogen, first of which is the performing of follow-up swabs. Since a pathogen positive only identifies the spot where the swab was taken from, the facility must perform follow-up swabbing in that area to determine the size and scope of the pathogen presence. The location of the positive should be treated as the center point of a bullseye, and swabbing should be performed in growing circles from that point, with the circles moving towards walls, partitions, equipment, or logical endpoints where bacteria can grow. As we discussed in episode 3, for how to submit swabs to the lab, the facility will need to create a swab schedule and location list for the emergency swabbing. The point of this swabbing is to help with cleaning and sanitizing efforts to remove all of the pathogen, so it is important to try and get follow-up positives, as this indicates the direction and spread of the pathogen. Acting quickly to remove the pathogen is important to limit the disruption of operations, but it will take several days and possibly weeks or months of activity to complete the process. A cleaning and sanitation program to address the pathogen must also be put into action. If an employee on site is responsible for the use of chemicals to address the pathogen, that employee should have experience in addressing a pathogen previously and must demonstrate competence in the required actions. If employees on site do not have the required experience to address the situation, a third party specializing in cleaning and sanitation should be consulted. Where the exposure is very limited, as would be the case where a positive is discovered from one swab in a seldomly used closet or in a drain, the facility may clean and sanitize the spot using normal techniques. Where pathogens are discovered extensively and near operational areas with exposed materials and products, the methods, timing, and chemicals used to address the situation will be more specialized. The industry standard practice for removing a pathogen is 3 follow-up negative results following each positive result for a pathogen. That means when a pathogen is discovered, cleaning and sanitizing is performed on the affected areas, followed by a new swab. Waiting a full day from the first follow-up swab, another swab may be taken, and the day after that, a third may be taken. Usually, test results from the first test may not be completed before the next test is sent, but if the goal is to complete the process as quickly as possible, that may be a desirable approach. When more time is available, or where the situation is such that operations must be fully halted during cleanup efforts, the team lead may choose to wait for the negative result from one test before performing the next test. If time allows, this is also a good approach. It is not uncommon for 1 or more negative test results to occur, followed by a new positive test result. In those situations, the 3 follow-ups must start over. Once the pathogen has been effectively removed from the location where it was discovered and 3 follow-up results demonstrate the pathogen is gone, that location should be included in swabbing actions for an extended period of time, as well as areas around that spot. Since the goal of environmental monitoring program is to find and remove pathogens when we discover them, it is important to follow up on previous locations consistently to make sure the pathogen is not present in hidden areas and growing or spreading to operations over time. Each swab event during the timeline of addressing pathogen removal must be properly documented, and it is best to perform a write-up of all activities and contacts with laboratories or other outside parties. In our video series on traceability and recall, we reviewed the process of recalling unsafe products to learn more about how to recall products where environmental pathogens have possibly contaminated the product. Please review that series. Thank you for watching. For more food safety training videos and resources, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn.